There's a common misconception across the industry with shippers that going direct is going to net you better rates across the board. And that isn't always the case. The reason being is that if you go carrier direct, you're not maximizing your spread of lanes across all discounts that you could possibly get. So that carrier might come across as super aggressive in one lane where you have the most volume in, but then in the other lanes that are here and there, they might not be the most aggressive. Although they think they're getting the best deal, at the end of the day, being able to have more of a broader portfolio of carriers that where this carrier is really good at maybe in the southeastern part of the US, this main national carrier is really good at the upper East Coast and the lower South. So being able to have a combination of both is good. But to take that a step further by implementing a relationship with a broker or being able to create a blended model with a company that has access to a wide variety of carriers, you're going to maximize your margins across the board.
I always find it interesting when talking to customers who have a direct tariff. Sometimes they're getting locked into that contract. They have to commit to a certain amount of volume in order to get those rates. And there is some simplicity for their operations team to just be working with one carrier, one billing, they get to know that carrier. But there's actually leaving money on the table because one tariff doesn't necessarily cover everywhere in the States well. And also, once you get into home delivery, there's multiple service levels, whether you're doing gray glove or whether you're going into the white glove space. It's really important to look at the overall carrier mix that you have. And I think that's where it makes sense to then start to work with a carrier partner, a brokerage who has access to multiple carriers. This gives you backups to your main direct tariff. And also, we start to find those places where there are going to be savings. And then you have a much more balanced carrier portfolio. And overall, you're going to get better rates through that blended model.
The most consistent feel that I get talking to customers when looking at the fact that you could go directly with a carrier to get your tariffs, or you could go with a third party provider to get pricing and whatnot and all the help you want in a partner, is they seem like two very different things. You're either one way or another, and one's always better than the other depending on the situation you're in. They could never be good together. You're going to go this way or this way. Let's say you're a smaller customer, you're going to look at the fact that going with a third-party logistics provider is probably going to be a better benefit to you because they're going to have better buying power. You're probably going to get better pricing overall across a wide variety of carriers than you would if you're a smaller customer going directly to the carrier. Plus, they're going to hopefully provide freight bill auditing and help with variance and disputes of that nature. Now, if you're an enterprise customer, let's say you've moved on to that next step in overall revenue and the amount of freight you do, you're going to look at it as, I have this massive team. I don't need necessarily somebody doing my rate negotiating for me, my freight bill auditing, whatnot. And I sure as heck don't need somebody taking a 10 to 20% margin on top of the rates that I could probably go get myself. So you're looking at it as going direct. I'm going to get the best pricing and I'm going to use all the savings I have to build that team in-house to do all the things that I'll probably lose if I don't use a third party. And I really don't want to use both because then I'm having my team spend time in, let's say, 2, 3, 4 portals. And then we're always trying to figure out, okay, this shipment went with who? What's the process to get a dispute here or to get a claim? And who's my rep? That kind of thing. And so there's always two views. Like one is better than the other, no matter what, just depending on what stage of your business you're in. And so obviously looking at it at a 1,000-foot view, if you could have the tech to bring in all of those and still make that convenience of one spot, but somebody doesn't own your pricing, but you can also get the benefit of having a fractional partner to help you with claims and disputes and things of that nature. That would be the ideal solution, right?
Today, it's like you have to have either a direct carrier or you're working with a brokerage. And then the internal teams are bouncing around between multiple websites. They're running it through Excel spreadsheets. It's all too much work. So they'll focus on just one option or the other. But really what you need to do is bring those together with one fractional partner.
There's a common phrase that I run into quite frequently as I'm out talking with accounts, both new and accounts that I'm actively prospecting. And that phrase is they don't like to put all their eggs in one basket. And the question from myself is always, but why? Another common trend that I run into quite frequently out in the field too is that companies that have more than one carrier direct relationship, so they have a spread of 3, 4, maybe even 5 different carrier directs that they utilize. And so when you're taking the approach of why not go to a 3PL or a brokerage or an agency of some sort, or even use a TMS system, the response is always, why would we put all our eggs in one basket? The answer is very simple, because if you break it down, not only the amount of time that they're spending going to each individual carrier website, amount of money they're also spending internally as a company on just simple time, the time spent in handling claims, the time spent in looking over variances and having to dispute those variances, and then not to mention the time that it takes from an operational support that they're having to reach out to carriers to track down shipments, schedule pickups, the whole 9 yards. And so my answer to that is if you break it down just a little bit for them and break it down in numbers of if you're paying an employee $20 an hour to do all these things, not that I'm trying to come in and take that individual's job, but at the end of the day, I have a whole team behind me that knows the processes, that knows what they're doing, and has more direct contacts within these carriers to get things done. So that amount of money being spent on that particular employee for 8 hours a day times $20 an hour, that's $40 a day. You could eliminate that position entirely by moving that portion of the business over to a more centralized platform, whether it be a TMS play or going over to a broker that has access to all of those carriers, who's going to likely do a rate study and compare their carriers versus your carrier direct tariffs. And if it's a smaller to medium sized business, more than likely that broker's network of carriers is going to come in a lot more aggressive across the board than that company's direct tariffs.
Many clients have had to downsize a little bit, and they're really looking at their internal resources. So when it comes time to managing the shipping, it can take a lot of time if you're working with multiple carriers, multiple contracts. How do you understand what is happening with each contract and when shipments are being booked, or if there's a problem, or if indeed there's freight auditing? It's not very consistent, and it might be a very small but mighty internal team that's having to manage all of that. This is actually a benefit of working with a brokerage or a carrier partner, because they're going to be managing all of that day-to-day activity, and then also on the invoicing and financing side as well. This gives consistency to a client's internal team so that they don't have to manage all of these different relationships. They're working through one partner. And this often frees up a lot of time. So again, a client can redeploy internal resources, and there's fewer people doing more work. So there is actually another benefit to working with a carrier partner who's managing all of those different carrier tariffs, whether it's a direct tariff or whether they're working with a brokerage's tariff.
At the end of the day, the top reason for a customer to want to switch to a blended model state of freight affairs would have to be probably price. They might say they have a lot of priorities, but they're always going to say, well, pricing is still a priority. I think one of the most massive benefits of having a blended model type of tech that can pull in is because of trust. And I say this because when it just came down to selling brokerage, the moment you had the highest trust with that customer was after they gave you data to do a rate study, and then they let you know if you won, how much you won by. Like, it was that timestamp. It was like, yeah, you're 10% cheaper on this entire data set than what I'm paying now. And there's a very good chance that if there's no other red flags, they're going to move over to you, right? That's an instant, theoretically, 10% savings. From there, that's when trust starts to go down. And there's a lot of ways you can keep that trust up with customer service, making sure you do a good job. But in terms of pricing by itself, trust can only stay the same or really go down if you're not actively trying to get them better pricing through CSPs or whatnot, because guess what? They have nothing else to compare it to. they only had that timestamp a year ago that you beat the last customer they were with, or the last provider they were with, or the last direct carrier. From there on out, they're always going to be slightly suspicious that maybe there's a little margin creep going on, or their pricing is getting higher than they think because they're not focusing on what the market's doing and all this. And the way I look at that, it's going to be the same whether you're a 3PL provider or a direct carrier. If they went all in with a direct carrier and they got the pricing, that day they got the pricing is as good as they're ever going to feel in that pricing. And it's always going to be lack of trust. And they might later on start taking calls from other competitors, just seeing what the pricing is. So the beauty of a blended model is if you have a partner, a 3PL partner, and you really don't need more than one if you're going to blend and use direct tariffs, because if that partner's doing as good as they can do for you, they never want to lose your business. So they're going to give you, they have aggressive blanket rates, but they're constantly looking, is there potential to get CSPs on certain lanes? What can we do? And then you have the direct tariffs that your company has procured themselves. So there's a little pride in that. Like, we did this, we know these are good pricing. And if you have both of those in the same TMS and you're still using both blankets from a third party and your direct, could be 50-50, could be 60-40, doesn't matter. The fact that you're still using both, there's a lot of trust in that, knowing that you're getting the best pricing possible and that it's that teeter-totter effect. If the market starts to swing and the 3PL pricing starts to get better, then they know their pricing is not as advantageous as they thought it was. But you would never really have that before if you didn't have the instantaneous showing of multiple rates, but also the data to look back and also say, yeah, the market is swinging upwards. The dollar per pound is going up. It might feel like your freight costs are going up, but so are everyone's. But the fact that you're looking at multiple tiers, you have a partner, a 3PL, and a direct tariff, you're good. We can work off of that.